I used to be a rather prolific artist. Art class was always my favorite. I pumped out dozens of drawings a day as a small child, and I even submitted an admittedly mediocre art portfolio for AP Studio Art. Yeah, I almost applied to MICA in Baltimore. Yeah, they would have eaten me alive. But then during college, I didn't have time in my schedule to take art elective classes like I had all throughout high school. It stopped being one of my primary means of self-expression. And for the most part, I don't mourn this. If I need to express myself through painting or sketching, I still have the means and the supplies. It's just that other creative mediums have taken priority in my life. But I do wonder sometimes, could there be something to gain from bringing this practice back into my routine, back into my life, which is why I am challenging myself for the next 30 days to use my sketchbook every day. The rules for this challenge were as follows. I must use my sketchbook every day for a minimum of 30 minutes. If I have to miss a day because, life happens, I can double up my time the following day to do a minimum of 1 hour. There's no time limit. If I'm really enjoying myself, if I'm really in the groove, I can keep working. Any and all mediums and subject matters are fair game. And lastly, creating good art or improving my skills is not the goal, rather just engaging with the practice consistently. I can guarantee there will be lots of mediocre and even crappy art being made, and that's okay. I don't think I'm going to frame this the same way I did my sewing challenge, doing an hour of sewing every day for a month. I don't expect there to be big life lessons or takeaways. I kind of just want to observe what happens. Internally, externally, all of that. Okay, that's enough for that intro, I think. Starting out those first few days, I mostly focused on just using the sketchbook, period. Just putting something on the page. I didn't make anything amazing, and in fact, it was quite bad, but I'm just so out of practice with drawing and painting that I just wanted to focus on relearning the feeling of making art again. I also didn't feel particularly inspired by any of the sketchbook prompts that I was finding online, so I decided to look back at art techniques and prompts that I've done previously and enjoyed and replicated those. So these first few days I have, without a doubt, made some of the ugliest art that I've ever made, probably. But the point wasn't necessarily to make anything good. I do have to keep reminding myself of that. The point was more so just to do the darn thing. I think what's frustrating about these is that, sure, I was just going through the process, going through the motions to get back into that a little bit, but they don't say anything. This is just stuff slapped on a page. It says nothing. It says nothing. It does not evoke any feelings. It's just there. Again, I think that's fine for the first few days. Just a warm-up, just like doing stretches before going on a run, but I think that's enough stretching. So tonight when I get home from work, I do want to pick out a proper prompt proper prompt for myself and do something that's going to take a little bit more time, maybe even take me a few days to complete, because the goal isn't to use 1 page per day. It is just to use my sketchbook every day. So what I might end up making next might take a few days. That's where I am. That's my update. In the effort of using actual prompts, I dug out some quotes I'd clipped from a book years ago that I've wanted to make visuals for. Again, I revisited using mediums that I've previously enjoyed, like these chalk pastels. For some reason, I loved using these chalk pastels back in high school, but I don't know what that was all about because I really didn't enjoy using them this time around. At this point in the challenge, my motivation and desire to work in my sketchbook was getting pretty low. I just wasn't enjoying it as much as I had hoped, but I also didn't want to give up on this project only halfway through. Which is why now is probably about the time that I should address the inevitable comments, or at least thoughts, that some people are having of, oh, but you shouldn't force yourself to make art when you really don't want to, but actually, I think you should. At least if making art and being creative is important to you. Sometimes we should force ourselves to do things that we may not want to do or have very low motivation for, particularly when we believe the outcome of those things to be worth the discomfort in the present. Sure, I am forcing myself to make art every day for a month, but the minor discomfort of that is a microscopically small sacrifice for the insight I believe I'll gain at the end of it. How many things do we force ourselves to do for the benefit of our health, for our families, for our education, etc., because we believe it to be worth the inconvenience or discomfort? And where it concerns creativity, if I only ever waited for inspiration to strike before working on my craft, I'd hardly ever make anything. Some of my best projects came from forcing myself to sit down and take the first step on an idea or chip away at a project, even when I didn't feel motivated to do it. Inspiration comes from engaging with creativity actively, intentionally, consistently, and sometimes by forcing yourself to do it. Not that inspiration and motivation never strike, but if I waited for them, I would create a lot less. So I'm at the point with this latest sketchbook attempt that I definitely need to just stop because I'm getting to the point where I'm just fussing with it and making it worse. And this one I actually tried. I wasn't just slapping color or scraps of paper on the page and calling it a day. I wanted to get back to practicing some actual skills, and it's definitely not my best work, but considering I haven't done anything like this in at least a decade, if not close to 15 years, it's not too bad. It's not amazing. I definitely can tell just looking at it that I made the eyeballs a little bit too big and they're not quite aligned right. I think the features of the face might be a little bit misaligned in general, but not egregiously. If I wasn't looking at them side by side, I don't think I would notice until I held it up in a mirror. If you want to get better at your art, looking at your stuff in a mirror is a good way to see what looks wrong. But if you want to feel good about yourself, that's not the way to go. But again, considering it's been so long since I've done anything like this, I'm not too disappointed. Good to know that those skills are not completely gone after years of just not using them. And I thought it was important to do at least one self-portrait during this process. I used to make variations of self-portraits all the time, whether it was for an assignment where we were literally told to make a self-portrait, or I would draw versions of myself in different animation styles. And I think that was an important part of my identity formation, was imagining myself in these different forms. And I haven't done a self-portrait in so long. I mean, obviously I take a million photos of myself for this channel. I get really sick of looking at my own face, but it's not like an artistic expression. There's a difference between a picture of yourself and a self-portrait. I might try to do a few more self-portraits during this process. I think they can be an important part of understanding not necessarily who you are, but who you view yourself to be. Not necessarily realistically, but just an expression of how you see yourself. And yeah, I don't have any of those from the last decade. I'm not loving this process so far, and I do think, again, that's because I started off not really doing anything that meant anything. It was just, oh, I said I was gonna do this thing, I guess I better do it. But finding something where I do feel like I was able to either execute it well or evoke some kind of feeling with it makes me enjoy it a little bit more. So anyway, it's so crazy that I can look at this straight on and it's yeah, that's all right, that's not bad. But as soon as you flip it around in the mirror, it's oh, never mind, it's not that good. But the same thing goes for the photo. If I flip the photo around and look at it backwards, I'm who is that? I don't know her. We don't know her. This third week is where my motivation and enjoyment of the process hit rock bottom. I again kept revisiting some previously tried and true techniques, creating an illustration with Sharpie and watercolor, but I felt so removed from the end result despite it turning out fairly decent. It felt like a copy of my old art, not a genuine expression of who I am today. I also had several days of just slapping something on the page during this stretch. I found myself really busy during this week as well and had to double up my time slot to an hour, more times than I really cared for, which probably didn't help with my overall lack of motivation and inspiration here. Dips like this are a part of normal and natural cycles, but man, do they feel crappy when you're in them. I get gradually more disheveled with each of these updates, but I'm working at home today, so I want to be comfy. So I have just over a week left of this challenge, so I think I'll make this my last update. So going into this last week, just because the lists of prompts that I have found online didn't really speak to me in any way, they were just kind of whatever, I am going to continue revisiting things that I did prior that I haven't revisited yet in this challenge. I have a couple eyeliner pens that I don't like. They're felt tip, and I just hate felt tip eyeliner pens, so I think I'm gonna try making something with these. I might try doing something involving trees because I really like trees, and I used to sketch and doodle trees a lot. I really want to endeavor this week also to not have to skip days. This past week I was so busy that it ended up kind of unfortunately being an every other day thing. There were some days that I was just so busy and I could not fit in a half hour, and so then the following day would be an hour. But I don't want to get too far away from the original vision, which was doing it every day a little bit. That backup plan to combine the time and make it an hour minimum was meant to be a backup plan, not the way things actually go. Just chipping away, making some mediocre stuff. I don't know what changed during the final week, but I felt like I finally hit some kind of stride. I still wasn't super eager to do my 30 minutes every day, but I felt like what I was creating was a true creative expression rather than a copy of a former version of myself. Even though what I was making was often fairly simple in its conception, I found it much more interesting to look back on. There was finally some spark of life on the page in the simple lines and shapes I was making, freed from the need to look like a complete finished thought. I found a good deal of satisfaction in being able to express movement with the simple lines of a graphite pencil, in the crude outlines of the shape of my hand made with a basic pen, and in simply drawing a regular old tree. Wow, guys, it's finally over. Wow, wow, wow. Yep, so it felt like this final week or so, like last 7 to 10 days, I finally started figuring out stuff I could do in my sketchbook that felt more genuine and not just straight up copying stuff that I used to make before. Which isn't to say that the copying is a bad thing inherently, because the idea was to see if those mediums, if those techniques still held any allure for me, I guess, still held any meaning for me. And they didn't, and so it just felt like a cheap copy of what I used to do, and it just isn't true to who I am now. Doing much simpler things felt much better. I don't know, I think this whole time I was telling myself like, okay, I'm not trying to make like finished artworks, it's just a sketchbook, but a lot of it was coming out as looking like an attempt at a finished artwork. And then this past week though, it does feel more like, okay, this is just work in a sketchbook. And it's much rougher around the edges and much less polished, but I like it so much better. But when I look at the little bit of art that I did make in college compared to what I made in high school, that's the general direction I was moving with my art anyway. I don't know, my high school stuff was so like crisp lines, clean, bright colors, and kind of hate it now. But moving into college, it definitely became a little bit more undone, more muted colors, less clean, less crisp. And I think if I had stuck with making art, I probably would have continued down that trajectory. But now that it's all said and done, I think I can definitively say I don't need this the way that I did when I was younger. Because even though during the last 7 to 10 days or so, when I was feeling like I was finding stuff that felt truer to myself to make and enjoying the process a little bit more, there were still 10 other things I would have rather been doing. And I pretty much was just working right up until that 30-minute mark, calling it quits. I often found myself doing this a bit reluctantly, even if what I was able to create in those 30 minutes was something that I thought was kind of cool and maybe enjoyed. I would have rather been doing so many other things. But I think putting myself through this month of frustration was worth it just to know once and for all that I don't need this the way that I used to. Guys, this is actually quite freeing. I feel free. I'm released. I no longer need to hold on to this idea of myself as an artist. I mean, not to say that I'm not an artist in other ways, but there was a point in my life when expressing myself through my studio art was so intrinsic to who I was, and it was what I had available to me at the time for self-expression. But now I think I have so many other means of self-expression at my disposal that creating art like this on a page has taken a back seat. And I feel like the skills that I learned as a teenager, as a child, they're still in there, but they're more in the background. They're a foundation that I built upon, and I do see them still crop up in the projects that I'll make today. So it's more integrated into what I make now rather than being a standalone practice. And I find that if I am going to make a painting or a drawing, it's usually for some very specific project or thing. Like it's embedded in something else. Like I made a silhouette portrait painting of me and my husband. I've made a couple paintings for around the house. I've made paintings using up my old makeup, and that's been really fun. So I still use it, but it feels like it's one of the tools in my creative toolbox rather than being my primary tool. And I gotta tell you, it's quite relieving to be able to definitively say that conclusion. Because for a while I have wondered, is it sad that I don't really paint anymore? Is it sad that I don't really draw anymore? Is this some part of myself that I dropped along the way and I should go back and retrieve it? But I think I can definitively say, no, I didn't drop it. It just took a back seat. Before we end this video, I will give you guys a quick sketchbook tour of what I made. I have reservations about putting my mediocre art on the internet for hypothetically the whole world to see. Yeah, I don't love that. I don't love that, but I feel like it would be wrong to make you sit through this whole video and not show you what I made. So, okay, quick little sketchbook tour coming up. Okay, this is as tall as I can get my tripod, so you're just gonna have to deal with it. Starting off the first day, did this little coloring book recreation of what we used to all do on Microsoft Paint, where you just make scribbles and then you color them in. This was fine for a meditation type of activity, but it's a whole lot of nothing. Then I followed up with an erasure poem. I think I went a little too hard with the metallic paint. I wish I'd left more of the page exposed. I like the little poem, but otherwise, again, a big nothing burger. This was another attempt to recreate a previously used method where I assign different colors to different numbers on a 10-sided die, and then whichever color I roll, I have to paint with. This worked for me once, and it's like my favorite abstract painting ever, but that was a case of lightning striking once. It has never struck again. I hate this. Then again, revisiting old methods that I used to use, I tried using chalk pastels to create a visual to go with this quote I clipped from a book. This is an example of stuff being way too reminiscent of what I used to make in high school. Very amateur use of chalk pastels. I don't know, it's just, ugh. I don't like it. Like, it's not horrible, but I don't like it. This was just a collage when I didn't have any thoughts in my head, and so I just looked for stuff in my scrap paper collection that I liked and slapped it together. Honestly, I don't hate this. This is one of the better things that I did during this process. There are definitely things that I can tell are incorrect that were hard to see during the process of making it. Like, I think I made the facial features all just a smidge too big. My husband thinks it looks like Natalie Portman. I don't see it. But honestly, for not having done something like this in well over a decade, I don't think it's too bad. Again, revisiting a technique I used to do in high school. I used to really love doing Sharpie illustrations colored in with watercolor. First mistake was that this paper was not meant for watercolor, so it's a little wibbly wobbly. And even though it's not badly done, like it looks fine, I just don't like it because it doesn't feel like something that I currently would make. Again, this was an illustration just to go along with a quote from this book. On this day, I just doodled my husband sitting on the couch. And this was really difficult because he was sitting at a weird angle and he kept moving. Yeah, I mean, it's not great, but it passed the 30 minutes. Another one using up some of the words and phrases that I had clipped out of a book. This kind of feels like fake deep, like hashtag I'm 14 and this is deep, with the two sides of the mask, having words of different connotations. It's fine. I think this one might be my favorite out of the whole process. I just have a couple eyeliner pens that I don't like and didn't really work out for me, so I decided to just make a line drawing of a tree in a spooky forest. This definitely feels a little Junji Ito inspired, and then I just have graphite in between the trees to add some shading and really pull focus to that center tree. Then I followed up with another tree-based doodle, just zooming in on the tree. This is a multicolor pencil that I've had since I was like 10, where every stroke you make is a different color, and it's really, really cool. It's hard to blend with it though, but I like the effect. Then because I was enjoying that pencil so much, I decided to use it to make just a little sketch drawing some crazy hair. I like this one as well. I think this one turned out really cool. Again, using the same cool pencil, trying to do kind of a contour sketch of my hand. And then while I was at it, I just stuck with making hands. Just doing a couple gesture drawings. The goal is to not pick up your pen or pencil the whole time. So the hands end up looking a little bit wonky, but I think it's a good practice for just getting the hang of the shape of hands. Then we have a couple figure drawings, just line drawings, trying to capture the shape of the body and movement. These are two pictures of Aurora from her stage performances. Hands are really freaking hard, but otherwise I enjoyed doing these sketches. Then, keeping with simple graphite line sketches, I copied a portrait of myself that I took out in the woods the other day. And our last one, again, trying to copy a self-portrait of sorts from at the beach. The line drawing itself was fine, but then adding the watercolor was a mistake. Again, this paper's not meant for watercolor. I think adding the watercolor kind of just makes everything blend together. I'm not crazy about it, but that is where I ended. So there's my mediocre sketchbook stuff. Please be nice. If you made it to the end of this video, leave a paintbrush emoji. All right, yep, thank you. Thank you for watching. Please be nice. Okay, bye.